Welcome in to the Week 12 edition of the Need for Screens College Football Podcast, presented by the pregame.com podcast network. I'm your host, the real underscore G Warner, joined by at Big East Ben. We had our first double best bet of the season last weekend. Uh, I don't know what happened at Big East Ben. Would you care to enlighten the audience on how a night in Tiger Valley, Death Valley, felt like a tigress valley?
It was sad. The stands were empty in the third quarter. I mean, Jalen Milroe was just running all over them. Um, yeah, it was depressing, and you gotta question Brian Kelly's possible job security going farther after another disappointing season without college football playoffs, without making the expanded college football playoffs. Is this the end for the Southerner? Is this the end for the Southerner from Everett, Massachusetts?
Yes, with his Cajun accent twang on the college basketball floor not too long ago. Yes, apparently LSU was sucking its own tiger thing, unfortunately. But we will bounce back. We will move forward into this weekend, and we have a slate of 5 games to discuss. But before we get into that, a little bit of a curveball for today. We had the first official 12-team bracket put out there, or at least one that came out last night. Any surprises to you with the 12-team college football bracket projection besides Texas not being number one?
With all those wins over top 25 teams, Texas isn't one. Um,
All those
yeah,
wins, the same amount that at Big East Ben and at the real underscore G Warner have won ourselves this year.
yeah, no real surprise. Boise State was the 12, right?
That's what I see currently. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with it. I mean, Boise, I wouldn't be surprised if Boise State maybe like drops one of these last two. They have been fading a bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing why we did not do this a long time ago.
Are you saying that because it would be way better to have 12 teams making it a playoff and more money, or what do you mean?
No, just because I feel like it keeps a lot of teams engaged um, when they're in contention, and actually just makes everyone says it's going to diminish the value of the regular season, but it is pretty crappy to have every single game matter. Like you should be able to have a speed bump every now and then and have the chance for postseason glory.
What's different to me is it felt like every game was a absolute emergency. If you lose, you're done, you're out, which is high stress and I think also forces a lot more eyeballs towards the television. But I mean, when every bowl season we're wondering how many teams are just going to have their best players decide they're going to train for the NFL draft versus actually play in the bowl game, I think that's different. It does seem also nice that this sport is not only about Alabama and Clemson for 3 straight years like it was a few years ago. It had diversified a little bit since then, but I'm just very, very curious to see how this bracket ends up working out because to me, Ohio State has such a gift going through Boise, Miami, and potentially a rematch with Oregon if there are no upsets. And I just like to me, it feels like there's going to be some ways to exploit this. Whoever gets that BYU or whatever team that comes out of the Power Four conferences all seem very interesting to me. But we'll get more on that as we go through the season. So, on today's episode, like I mentioned, we're going to go through a 5 pack of football games. We'll give our best bets end of show. No guarantees on a double best bet on this episode, but it could happen. We'll start actually with a game that I will be in attendance for, assuming Lord willing and that creek don't rise. Probably not that funny after the tragedies in Valencia recently, but looking at the Texas Longhorns, who I just mentioned, I'm very disappointed they weren't number one overall, but as I think Big East Ben summarized pretty well, they've beaten nobody this entire season. So why in the world would they be the number one overall. Why, honestly, would they still be first in the SEC? I guess SP Plus really likes Texas. I'm still, as a alum, waiting to see what they see. But Texas is down from 15 and a half point favorites down to 13 right now as we publish this on Wednesday, November 13th. Texas, a 13-point favorite, totals 57 and a half on the road at Arkansas.
Both teams very strong against the spread this year, 6-3. Arkansas's quarterback, Kaelin Green, there was some questions on whether he was going to play. He is going to play. So that's very important for the Hogs. I'm still not sold on this Texas defense. I mean, they obviously got exposed to Georgia, but I mean, they really haven't faced, again, those marquee games, the Michigan game, the Oklahoma game, the Florida game. None of those teams had their starting quarterback. None of those teams had their starting quarterback. So I'm still not sold on them. I am sold on the Texas offense. They're legit. I think Arkansas can probably hang in this one, but I think the better bet is the over. Arkansas's defense has been an absolute sieve this year, giving up 60 points to Mississippi, Ole Miss. So I think it's going to be a high scoring game. Conditions look pretty favorable for you in Fayetteville.
Hey, 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 whoa, 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 whoa. Slow those horses. It was supposed to rain until yesterday.
I checked the weather last night. It said 62 and sunny.
It was supposed to rain until yesterday. So I don't know where this forecast has come from, but I'm hoping that I won't be having to wear my camo gear because I don't own any.
Where are you
I
staying?
no idea. Probably at
You have
a
tickets.
I do have tickets. Everything is settled. I have not figured out the logistics. But worst case scenario, well, I'll call up one of our former NBA classmates in Bentonville and ask if they have a an extra like wing to their house that Walmart's paying for. Um, so my concerns are actually more on the offensive side with Texas. As interesting as you say, that you are more concerned about the defense. I feel like Quinn Ewers is probably getting healthier from the oblique injury from earlier in the season, but I'm still not really sold on him. For the amount of hype that he's had and accrued throughout his career, I'm still just questioning a little bit about that. The Arkansas defense to me is very, very interesting because they'll give up 63 to Ole Miss, but they'll only give up 14 at home to Tennessee. Both those games in the same Bud Walton adjacent arena that I'm going to be heading to this weekend. Blowout loss at home to LSU. I mean, they've had a ton of huge home games, but then also only gave up 21 on the road to Texas A&M. Hard to predict what this Arkansas team will do, and I think that is what makes a market here. I think, as you mentioned, the quarterback looks healthy or looks like he will be starting, and that's why this number has crept on the other side of 14. You went, remind me of your total play on this one, 57 and a half. You went
Yep.
over 57 and a half. I'm going to go with the home underdog, Arkansas, plus 13
Ooh.
in this matchup, which might be very, very complicated for me to be wearing orange, which I don't like to wear. A white version of a burnt orange team and potentially rooting for Arkansas to cover the spread, slash will be rooting for Arkansas to cover the spread. Luke,
Question.
go ahead.
Did you have any thoughts on Quinn Ewers' DMs?
Were they all Trump related? That's all I've seen.
No, they're all horny related.
Oh, they probably can't be worse than Todd Golden, but we'll be talking about that
Oh,
next on
hey
the
man, that's
on
all alleged.
we'll all be talking about that on the next Need for Seeds college basketball podcast, also featured on this pregame.com podcast network, and that'll be broadcast out to you soon, very soon. And I will have a scientific take on Todd Golden and his um Hmm. His approach of 19-year-olds, which are actually somewhat within his age range, but we'll get to that on the college basketball version of this show. Next, we'll move to Utah at Colorado, a big battle in Mountain West Ben's backyard, though I think he's still chained under the staircase. Utah, a 10 and a half point underdog coming off a brutal loss in their holy war, as they call it, in I guess somehow, some way, it turned into a loss against BYU. Utah, 10.5 point underdogs on the road at Colorado. Total is 46.5.
That was totally fixed, right? Like, do we agree that that was fixed?
The broadcasters were not going as far to say it was fixed, but Dave Fleming, I think, called it one of the most interesting calls he's ever seen, which is saying something because the guy literally does 162 Major League Baseball games a year. And for those calls that are made, anything that looks shadier than what the hell, ever the hell Major League Baseball instant replay is covering up for their buddies, I trust him.
I mean, that was an embarrassment. Back to back, 4th and 10, holding calls to extend the play, or two, not back to back, two on the drive
Yep.
to keep BYU's college football playoff hope. Well, they would have still been alive even with a loss, but just obviously
Certainly
solidifies
makes
things.
their possession a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So it all depends on how Utah responds. Do you respond with fire and vinegar that this conference is going to try to screw us? Let's go out and beat another one of their darlings,
Mm.
this time on the road in Boulder. Or do you say, hey, the cards are stacked against us. We don't have a chance. Why even go out and try? Um, I do have faith in Ken Whittingham to kind of get his guys to respond. He's very good in that spot. Obviously, a disappointing season for Utah that went down the drain as soon as Mr. Rising's leg stopped responding.
Mm.
This one's tough. I'm gonna go with the Buffs. I can't argue with that 7-2 against the spread record. They've covered 7 straight games. They've been killing teams at home, save for that Baylor miracle in Kansas State. But I mean, their last one, Cincinnati, easily covered on the road against Tech in Arizona. I think Utah, without Rising, is in the same class as Texas Tech and Arizona. I'm going to go with Coach Prime continuing that playoff push, still holding my college Colorado football play to make the playoff futures ticket, 14-1. Very excited about that. Go Buffs.
So at Big East Bend, we'll go Colorado minus 10.5. Might want to grab that number sooner rather than later, as it looks like it's trending toward 11. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the of the two scenarios you put out there. I think Whittingham will do a fairly decent job of getting his team still there. Kyle Whittingham, I think, not Ken Whittingham. I think Ken Whittingham
Kyle.
was the
Yep.
Steelers offensive coordinator back in the day, maybe. Maybe not. But I think the Utah defense, I think, will show up here. I'm going to go under 46.5. Sorry to hear that Mr. Rising's leg responded like all those co-eds in Gainesville. We'll move next to the Tennessee Georgia matchup, which is pretty large, looms large for this potential playoff positioning. We get Tennessee, a 10-point underdog on the road at Georgia, totals 48.5. Very similar to the game we just discussed inside and total.
Uh, the last time the Volunteers left Knoxville,
Uh, I'm guessing it was not yesterday.
October 5th.
Oh, it's been a month, more than a month.
October 5th against Arkansas, where they were 14-point favorites and they lost outright. Their only other road game was against Oklahoma, that great Sooners team where they did win. Um, but
Yes.
this team has been confined to the friendly confines of Bud Walton Stadium. No.
Bud Walton is the Walmart arena for Arkansas
Yeah.
basketball. Neyland Stadium,
Neyland Stadium.
Thompson Bowling Arena, I think, is the basketball stadium in
Got
Knoxville.
it. So these guys have been getting fat and happy, staying at home in Knoxville. Going on the road to Athens is a brutal environment. This Georgia team knows they need to win this to stay in college football contention. They right now are the last spots looking in. Um, so give me the dogs in this one. They've been dominant at home. They've played a harder schedule thus far. I think they destroy this Tennessee team that I think has been buoyed a bit, obviously, by the impressive win versus Alabama, but again, not playing much outside of that.
Yeah, very long time since they've been on the road. Big question mark, especially if you go drop a game to Arkansas, who's had a lot of rumors about firing their head coach. Not great to then get four home wins all back to back. But I mean, I didn't know the SEC's schedule makers would do that type of thing, but very, very nice to Tennessee so far. They've just been so fat and happy in that Knoxville inexplicable traffic. Always traffic around Knoxville at any time. Doesn't matter if it's Sunday night or actual rush hour. No idea why, but there's always traffic there. And I'll think that they got out of Knoxville probably a little bit safely, but I'll go under 48 and a half in that matchup. I think Georgia wins, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer than the experts predict, at least in a scoring fashion. We'll move next to the number one team in the land in a long-standing rivalry as Oregon visits Wisconsin as a 14-point favorite, very juiced at the moment. So again, if you like the home favorite, or excuse me, the road favorite here, you might want to jump in sooner rather than later to make sure you lock in that 14 and don't have to deal with 14 and a half at game time. But Oregon, a 14-point favorite on the road at Wisconsin, total is 52.
Something crazy has to happen, right? Like Oregon's not going to go undefeated
I
after that
mean,
opener against Idaho. Like, come on,
what
it's
I
college
don't
football.
what okay. And you think that the Wisconsin Badgers and their newly, I think, resigned Jack Del Rio, they're going to release
Oh, we got
him.
to talk about that.
As far as I know, he like worse than Bob Huggins. Like he hit a parking sign and toppled it over, and is
No, he drove through someone's fence and the car came to a stop in the front yard.
even better.
And he tried to walk away.
Well,
The police got there. Witnesses are like, "Hey, it's that guy. It's the coach for the Jaguars."
yeah, he had a really good run, Blake Bortles. We'll put it that way.
Um, no, it doesn't come to a halt here in Madison, although it's going to be a great environment. But I mean, Oregon has proved their mettle on the road this season. Oregon State won by 35, UCLA won by 21, Purdue won by 35, Michigan won by 21. I would put Michigan in the same class as Wisconsin at this point. I know I'm going like very heavy with the favorites this week, but uh, my record has not been great recently, so I'm going with the safer picks. Give me the Ducks to blow out a hapless Badgers team that has beaten up on the dregs of the Big Ten, Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern, but not much else. So give me the number one team in the country to continue rolling.
Yeah, so interesting that you mentioned both a drag for the Wisconsin Badgers schedule and their wins, also one of the big road wins for Oregon.
It
Uh,
wasn't a bait. I said they've handled business on the road.
I'm just saying that like I don't know that you can play that they will go in both directions. That Oregon is a decent road showing at Purdue, also a drag victory for Wisconsin. I'm not trying to pick any flaws in the argument, but I think we see a lot of running the football from Wisconsin, and I think that will wind down the clock, try to make this as close as possible, hang in as long as possible, so at least there's some students still around to jump around as they head into the third quarter or end the third quarter, I think, at Camp Randall. I've not been there yet, so I cannot say exactly, and memory does not serve. I'll go under 52 in that matchup, and we'll come to our last game on the list, which does seem a little bit interesting, especially considering BYU after their gift. You could say from God, but I wouldn't want to link BYU and God together because I'm sure that seems very lazy from a podcast host. But Kansas is in town. Nope, not the Jayhawks basketball team. Bill Self will be tending to his toupee somewhere else, maybe outside Atlanta today. But we're discussing the Kansas football team. They're a 3-point underdog on the road in Provo, Utah. Totals 55 and a half.
Speaking of that, watching the games last night at Madison Square Garden, they had those 4K cameras on the court, and he was whining about a out of bounds call, and they had like a very just slow motion of his face, and it was very funny. It was
In case you're wondering, and you're not actually watching the video but listening, you miss out on Big East Ben's facial expressions. The game was actually in Atlanta, but I guess it doesn't matter too much there.
this game?
Not
Wait, what
this.
do you mean? What game's in Atlanta?
Kansas was playing in Atlanta last night.
No, they weren't. They were playing at Madison Square Garden.
If you want to do another bet,
That was at that was in Atlanta?
you want to do another bet, because the last bet was pretty hilarious. What do we bet this time at Big East Ben?
You're telling me that game was in Atlanta?
I'm telling you, the game was in Atlanta.
Both games were in Atlanta?
No, they just flew the court down from Madison Square Garden to Atlanta and said, let's get this going here.
Well, I'm embarrassed. I went 2-0. Um, so maybe I don't pay attention to these neutral site locations.
Well, you were pretty good at saying, yeah, they're playing at the Toyota Center for the Houston Cougars, but that's a different podcast. Stay tuned for the Needs for Seeds. We'll get to that tomorrow on the episode. But
I was
yes,
like, wow, a lot of people travel from Lexington to New York City.
well, I mean, every place that has a Kentucky basketball game. Well, even I went to a Big East championship game way back when at Big East Bend, where the Louisville Cardinal were playing in the finals against Cincinnati, and there were CATS, 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 Cats chants going the entire game. And at that point, I realized that Kentucky just doesn't even really care only about Kentucky. They just care about anything that's Kentucky plus what they can root against related to the state of Kentucky. That includes Louisville. So, Kansas football, the Jayhawks, they are a 3-point underdog on the road in Provo, Utah. Totals 55 and a half. If you're still not looking up where the basketball games that you bet on and went 2-0 on last night were located.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky line. I think it'd be more at maybe like 6.5 BYU.
Huh. Why do you think why would you think that would occur?
Well, I'm looking at the injury report, and there's no the,
Hmm.
the Jews playing.
Hmm. Seems very interesting that this number would be sitting here at 3. So basically, we're saying BYU and Kansas, if you're using the lowest common denominator of home field advantage in college football, that these two teams are even, except last time I looked, the Kansas football record is not undefeated. It is instead, I'll tell you where they are also in the Big 12. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from bottom in the Big 12. They are 0 and 4 away. They are 2 and 4 in the conference. They are 3 and 6 overall. And BYU is 9 and 0, yet 3-point favorite.
Yeah, it's a rat line, and I'm staying away from it, and I'm going to take the over.
Okay. Rat line, staying away from it. But since we do have to pick, especially for the hallowed at Big East Bend college football graphic, Kansas over 55 and a half for Big East Bend on this episode. I mean, the number says what the number is. I think there's a good chance this lands on 3 and we push, and the rat line just doesn't really work out for anybody. I'm going to go with Kansas plus 3, as I think this number just does not make any sort of sense if you are backing this cheap of a home favorite. I think it works in college basketball. I don't think it works here in college football. I'll take KU, a 3-point underdog, away from home at BYU. So now it is time for our best bets. But before we get into that, I want to give everyone a way to save some money at pregame.com, because that's what we're about. It is almost the holiday season. We are about giving back to you. Hopefully, you can save some money on finding some winning wagers. Make sure you use the college football promo code for this episode. It is BOMB15, BOMB15. Hopefully, you're not listening to this too loud on an airplane. Don't want a Ben Stiller meet the parents type of situation here. $15 for all listeners of this college football podcast. Get $15 off. Use that promo code BOMB, BOMB 15. Good for 7 days from podcast release. So you have until the 20th, but don't wait. You might want some winners this week, whether Big East Ben knows where the games are being played or not. Jump on and jump in. Use the promo code BOMB15. At Big East Ben, where are you going for your best bet on this week's episode?
Why do you hate cats, Greg?
Can you milk me?
I got two.
Oh, okay. What I mean, I
Yeah,
know
I got
you're
two.
doing your honorable mentions at Big East Ben all over the place. So it's just every day a best bet is not enough for at Big East Ben. He's got two, and he's got two on this podcast. Go ahead.
So best bet number one, Missouri visiting South Carolina, trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, according to their head coach Elijah Drinkwater.
Yeah.
I don't know, buddy. They didn't expand to 62 teams. It's not the NCAA tournament. Um, Missouri has been god awful on the road this
Including a
season.
3-point underdog at home to Oklahoma, who we've I think talked about plenty in this podcast to the point where they're not even on it anymore because they aren't good enough.
Yeah, we missed them. We missed that line. That was Missouri was missing their starting quarterback. They have remained mum about whether Brady Cook is going to play this week, but these numbers are ugly. They did beat UMass by 42 in Amherst.
Ooh,
You can't discount the importance of that win.
big rivalry game there.
Yep, but went to College Station, lost by 31. Went to Tuscaloosa, lost by 34. The South Carolina team is absolutely surging. Beat Oklahoma by 26, beat Texas A&M by 24, beat our darling Vanderbilt by
Ooh,
3 touchdowns.
ooh.
Um, Missouri going to Columbus. This is going to be a bloodbath.
Columbia,
What did I say?
Columbus.
Columbus, Columbia. Um, give me give me the Cox minus 12.
Give at Big East Ben those Cox minus 12. For my best bet on this
And you
episode,
want to hear my second best bet?
it's not going to count. There's only one that can fit on the graphic, but you can say the honorable mention for all the people.
Honorable mention is Houston at Tucson, Arizona.
Ah,
Uh, they are currently a 1 point that spreads basically a pick 'em. But Arizona has totally quit on their season, won in a spread against the spread this year, absolutely getting blown out by everyone and anyone. Houston has a little momentum, won three of the last four, wins over, including the big one against Kansas State at home. Give me the Cougars playing stifling defense, similar to their basketball team.
yes. All right. So we got for best bet number one for at Big East Ben, we are going with Cox, and with his honorable mention, he's going with Cougars. For my best bet, I'm going to go to a game that I will be attending, and it's going to be very awkward, but I just like living my life as one of those turtles. And so I will go with Arkansas, 13-point underdog at home against Texas. I think this game means something to Arkansas. There's been a lot of history in this rivalry, and I was always surprised at how much Arkansas seemed to get up for Texas, including after a postponement when Bobby Petrino was the head coach and lost 52 to 10, and they got scared and tried to buy out of a game so they could start a series against Texas A&M way back when, which I guess made sense. But instead, this season, I think Arkansas will find something deep in their soul. Texas does not look great at covering spreads. Yes, they did smoke a Florida Gators team last weekend, but as at Big East Ben mentioned, without their starting quarterback, there is some question about Arkansas's quarterback, but I'm not sure there's a huge drop off to their backup from not great to less great. So I'll take the 13 points. I think we see Texas feel a little bit of pressure from basically not being able to take any more losses, especially with Texas A&M looming on the road around Thanksgiving later this month. So I'll go Arkansas plus 13, join at Big East Bend, South Carolina minus 12. And we will be back with you next week, but we'll also be back with you tomorrow on the Need for Seeds College Basketball Podcast presented by the Pregame.com Podcast Network. All I know is that I went 1-0 in my best bets last weekend in college basketball and be looking to keep that record perfect as we
No, you
move
didn't.
through. Yes, I did. My best bet was a winner. Yes. 1-0 on my best bet. 1-0. 1-0.
Oh, it's
Pick
Baylor. Right.
'em
There it is. There it
Bears.
is.
Actually, I need to never do that again because I really don't like them.
Yeah,
And
we had a lot of talk about on the need for seeds. Auburn fans are really mean on Twitter. A little preview.
ooh, great. Well, sorry for their football program. They're not relevant and have not been covered yet on this podcast this entire season, I don't think. So we'll get with you next week. Hopefully, you enjoy those best bet winners, the Cox and the Cougs. They always go together like white on rice. And we will see you all next week. And we'll see you all tomorrow for a college basketball podcast on the same dot channel.